Human beings are very complex creatures, and understanding other people and what drives them and what motivates them can be quite difficult to understand. And sometimes understanding ourselves and what drives our motivations and our decisions can be equally complicated, if not more. That's why they have whole sciences designed around human behavior and human thinking and motivations and trauma, psychology, certain areas within medicine, and other areas as well. You have whole sciences just designed around trying to understand people and the human brain and the human psyche. But there's one important factor when it comes to driving people's motivations and actions and decisions, which I wanted to talk about, which is intermittent reinforcement and how that can play out in terms of influencing people's behaviors and how some people use that in their favor. So, for those who don't know what that means, the term intermittent reinforcement is basically, if you think about, let's say you teach something and you have pupils, you have students, and let's say you have this one student who's always works hard and who always wants to deliver good quality work, whether it be reports, essays, presentations, whatever. If if you only praise them some of the time that they do good work, but not all the time. That's the essence of intermittent reinforcement. Is somebody can do good things to you 10 times. They can deliver good work 10 times, but maybe only 3 or 4 of the times you praise them and say they did a good job. The other 6 or 7 or 8 times, maybe you don't say they did a bad job. You just don't say anything. So the person never really gets that reinforcement, that praise that they did a good job. So that's the essence of it. Normally, in most settings, whether it's work, family, where people have this fluent dialogue, where feedback on something is quite good to have, what people's thoughts are, you can usually feel quite reliable that if you do something good, somebody will let you know. You feel reassured. Great. Maybe if you do something that's not so good, somebody will let you know, maybe where you can improve. Okay, you have the feedback. Great. You have that takeaway. But oftentimes, you don't always have that strong correlation between what you do and the feedback. And which kind of goes back to my initial example. So if you're in a work setting or in a school setting or in a relationship setting, and you do something really good and you work really hard, but let's say only 5 out of 10 times, or maybe 4 out of 10, or 6 out of 10 times, people praise you for that. But the other times, you don't really know where you stand. You don't really know what they thought of your work, what they thought of your actions, if it was good or not. That's the concept of intermittent reinforcement. And when you do something good and you get a good feedback, you feel good about it. And if you do something good and you don't get the good feedback, sometimes you find yourself thinking, "Oh my God, did I not do a good job? Did I do a good job? I want to get the good feedback." Maybe you'll try doing something again. You'll try to do another good piece of work or do another good deed or another good action to see if the person praises you. And then maybe the next time you do something, they say, "Oh yeah, great job, I like this," or "I appreciate this," and they give you that warm smile, and you're like relieved, right? Because you've received that positive reinforcement. Um, just kind of taking a sideways step from all this, when there's a very predictable pattern of what the response is going to be from what you're doing. Like if you do a good piece of work and you know you're going to get good feedback because that's what the track record suggests, or if you do a bad piece of work and you get bad feedback, and that's kind of what the track record suggests. There's always that kind of correlation. It becomes rather predictable. You kind of know what response you're going to get. And, when the response is good, you feel good, but because it becomes predictable, you already predict that positive response back. That positive feedback becomes less potent. Like you still enjoy it, but it's not like such a big deal. You're like, yeah, I kind of knew that they were going to like this work I did. Or I kind of knew that my spouse was going to like this dinner that I planned, or this trip that I planned, or how I cleaned the house for them, or whatever you did. But when somebody's applying intermittent reinforcement in your relationship dynamic, where you never quite know if you're going to get that good feedback that's going to give you that uplifting feeling, the uncertainty around that, it really gets you psychologically, mentally wanting that feedback a bit more. When there's something that's less predictable, when you do something and the response is less predictable, and the good response, the positive assurance, the positive response is less predictable, you find yourself thinking about it a lot more, and you find yourself sometimes wanting that positive reassurance a lot more. Some might say, in some contexts, you might say, oh, well, that might even motivate the person to do better work because they're constantly wanting more positive reassurance, positive feedback. And there's some truth to that. There is some truth to that. But manipulating people oftentimes use intermittent reinforcement for their own agenda. And some might even say ulterior motives, almost like they're using the person, kind of draining the person. Because if we take this intermittent reinforcement in the context of so it's not only manipulating people do that, it's quite normal, and I think we all have done it to some extent in one way or another. But manipulators use intermittent reinforcement very tactfully to really get the target to obsess over them, the person that they're trying to manipulate, to obsess over them, and to obsess over doing a good job for them. And what that means is the person who's applying intermittent reinforcement in the early days, let's say you do 2 or 3 or 4 good things for them, and they give you all kinds of good feedback. Oh yeah, you did good. I really liked this. I really felt good about that. And then you do something else that's good, and nothing, silence. Radio silence. You get nothing back. And then you find yourself wondering, oh, is this person upset with me? Did I do something wrong? Let me do something else good to see if they respond, because this silence is unnerving me because I was expecting a good feedback but I didn't get it. And then you try to jump through another hoop, you try to satisfy them, and then sometimes again, nothing, no feedback. Or they give you some kind of response, but it's not clear if they were pleased with you or not. And at that point, if you're really dependent on their positive feedback, you're finding yourself kind of eating your nails, scratching your head, your skin. Maybe your hair is falling out of anxiety. You're thinking, oh, what's wrong? Because maybe you were dependent on that validation. So you sometimes you can't help but think, I must have this positive reassurance from this person, otherwise I can't really exist in my skin. So then you start scrambling in an effort to please the person, or to do something for them to demonstrate that they're pleased with you, to give you that positive feedback. So at the core of intermittent reinforcement is it's not predictable. And when somebody's giving you positive feedback in an unpredictable way, you find yourself wanting that feedback even more. You find yourself obsessing over what the person is thinking of you and why they didn't give you the feedback that you needed or were expecting. You try to rationalize, oh, why were they pleased those first few times, but now they're not saying anything? And sometimes you can get yourself so caught up in the web of what's happening. Is something wrong? So manipulators understand that concept very well. And if they also understand you, the target, and if they understand what motivates you, they can apply that to you in a way to benefit them. It's also in the application, the way they apply it, when they apply it, how they do that. So, yeah, so while intermittent reinforcement is a thing that, you can see everywhere a little bit all the time, manipulators can weaponize it in their favor. So if you're aware of what that means, and if you're aware of how intermittent reinforcement works, and if you're aware of your own motivations and how that's affected by such things, then you can protect yourself a lot from being manipulated and controlled through these tactics. But it's good to understand the basics of it, in that it exists, and just be careful around people who seem to be applying a series of tactics on you that just kind of make you feel either anxious, paranoid, uneasy, fearful, anybody who's doing things that make you feel like that, they could be operating manipulating tactics on you in disguise.